tomcat for leaving her by herself for so long in the dark. When he tried to make an amorous advance, she nipped him in the ear and let him have a piece of her mind. Maybe she should nip Albert in the ear. She put the thought out of her mind. She'd spent enough time worrying late at night that he'd never make it back from the sea. She didn't want to push away something she wanted so much. She heard the sound of a cat behind her, a long, mewling sound that grew deeper. It was unsettling. Mary backed away from the street corner and stepped farther back on the sidewalk near the side of the building. She heard the cat again. This time the sound was closer and deeper. She'd grown up with the usual superstitions about cats, taught by her grandmother, who grew up in the hills of Ireland. Nonsense, she knew, but they still seemed like quasi-mystical animals to her. The cat's meow turned into a growl. It was close by, but she couldn't tell what direction it came from. The sound came again. This time it changed pitch and was coming straight toward her. She thought she could hear faint footsteps. "Mary," called out the sound. Mary's breath came out in stunted gasps. She was about to run when she noticed a familiar smell. "Mary O'Mallory, oh, how I love thee." Mary swung her purse into the fog and felt it connect. There was a thud, followed by a cackle. "You horrible man," she shouted through laughter. "Oh, don't you know it," said Albert's familiar voice, with his impish lilt. "Still see you have no love for cats. Or you either," she said as she gently pushed him away. Albert stepped into view from the shadows, with his broad grin and locks of dark hair poking out from under his cap. He kissed her on the cheek. "Oh, my," said Mary. "You're late. 1,000 pardons, Miss O'Mallory. One of our mates didn't make it home last night, and we were checking the saloons to see if he'd been waylaid." He took her hand in his and began to walk down the street. "I bet you did," she said, as she placed her other hand on top of their joined pair. "Had a pint or two, I'm sure." Albert slapped his pocket. "Only drank what I sang for, saving my money for you." He had a lovely voice, and sang with a cheerfulness that could brighten a dark tavern or make even the most solemn choir song sound like a celebration. She'd met him at St. Anthony's, where he would sing at the occasional mass. Although the congregation was a little more upscale than a shanty whaler like Albert was used to, the older ladies had welcomed his charm and voice, and seemed not to mind his sooty clothes or slightly off-color sense of humor. He had a good heart, a big smile, and sang like a devilish angel, which was most welcome in the predominantly Irish church. He whistled as they walked along the sidewalk. He brought them to a stop on the corner and listened for carriages. There was no way to see one coming in the mist. She held his arm and leaned into his shoulder. She smelled his coat and smiled. When they reached Flaherty Street, the whistling stopped. "Well, I'll be," said Albert. "What's the matter?" she asked. "I could swear." His voice trailed off. "Albert?" "God damn!" he screamed as he was yanked sideways and fell to the ground. Mary kept hold of his hand. She looked down and saw his face look up at her from the fog. He'd gone completely pale. Paralyzed with panic, she didn't know what to do. "Albert!" she screamed. "Not here! Not here!" he shouted. Albert's body was dragged away from her and into the fog. Mary tried to keep a tight grip on his hand. "Albert! Albert! What's going on?" She pulled on his hand, trying to keep him from whatever was tearing him away. Suddenly he was lifted to the height of Mary's shoulders. His eyes looked into hers, scared and desperate. "Run, Mary! Run!" he screamed as his body was jerked into the dark.